I have the distinct pleasure of introducing someone I really admire as a scholar, a friend of many years. I always tell him that I want to be like him when I grow up. He's one of the most prolific scholars I know. He's going to be presenting his new book, and the title of his presentation is Politics and Racism Beyond Nations, a Multidisciplinary Approach to Crisis. Dr. John Linstroth.
Thank you. I'm just going to put these on the table. Look at. First of all, I'd like to thank the Honorable Dr. von Feigenblatt for inviting me to present my book today, which is called Politics and Racism Beyond Nations, a Multidisciplinary Approach to Crises. And the Honorable von Feigenblatt was very generous in his time and generosity to invite me here today. And so what I'd like to do is start off with a couple stories about the book, which are in the book. Very diverse aspect of the book, and I don't want to speak for too long, but I want to at least introduce you to the book. The book itself covers a wide range of topics, from immigration to nationalism to terrorism to genocide to empathy, love, and peace, which is quite a broad range of topics. But one of the stories that I'll tell, when I was a student, master's degree student at Florida State University, I had the privilege of studying Black Baptist churches in southern Georgia. And I was invited by a deacon of the church to his home, where he told me how his father was a sharecropper, his grandfather was a slave, and he was a Tuskegee Airman. If you don't know anything about Tuskegee Airmen, they were a segregated unit during World War II, flew 1,700 missions and were awarded over 100 flying service crosses. This particular gentleman was educated at Florida A&M University, and the only job that he was able to get was as a janitor, which started my thinking about, what is racism, how do we overcome it, and for many years. Another story in the book is about my personal experience with the Basques. Part of the book is about nationalism and terrorism. When I was in the Basque Country, I was there studying fishermen initially, and then I ended up studying a parade for the equality for women. It was called the Larde Parade. But anyway, I was kindly asked to leave by one of the political supporters of the terrorist group ETA, Euskaritas Katasuna. They said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm studying fishermen." "Well, we don't really want you here." So, and that was interesting in and of itself, because 14 years later, I ended up going to Oslo, Norway, and to work for this organization called PRIO, the Peace Research Institute of Oslo, where I ended up negotiating with the same terrorist organization for them to end terrorism. So it comes full circle in life sometimes. In any event, this book is multidimensional, and the book's title is Politics and Racism Beyond Nations, a Multidisciplinary Approach to Crises. I talk about many different aspects of not only racism, but politics and nationalism, genocide, and I end up discussing aspects of love and peace from not only a indigenous perspective, from the notion of interbeing, that we're all interrelated on this planet, but from a Buddhist perspective as well. So one of the aspects I wanted to talk about was my research with Guatemala Maya immigrants and with Brazilian Amerindian peoples. I studied 8 different ethnic groups in Brazil: the Apurina, Cambeba, Kokama, Munduruku, Mura, Chikuna, Tucano peoples. And what I found is that if I compared the Guatemala-Mayan immigrant experience with the Amerindian experience, they experienced quite a lot of racism against them. So what I theorize about in the book is not only do I talk about their biographies and how they've experienced it, but I talk about memories of racism in relation to trauma. And what does that mean? If we think about memories in relation to trauma, they can think about concepts of time, diachronic and chronic, how racism itself can act upon the individual over long periods of time in a diachronic manner, but how specific episodes affect the individual, and that's synchronic. And so I talk about that in the book in relation to memory, in relation to how people can be tragically affected in their lives by this, and what that means for the individual, but also what we can learn from that and overcome it. One of the aspects of the book is understanding how we can come to a better understanding of peace and love and empathy with individuals. And I interviewed monastics, Buddhist monastics, so 3 Buddhist monks and a Buddhist nun. And also, because of my work with indigenous people, I realized that their notions of interbeing, that we're all interrelated as far as all living beings on this planet, we have to come to a better understanding of who we are. And I think that, so some aspects of the book touch on that as well. So if you're interested in purchasing this book, is available on Amazon. It is well regarded as far as a book on conflict resolution and relating to all these very difficult topics of immigration and nationalism and terrorism and genocide, even because the Guatemala Maya immigrants who I studied have memories of genocide. And so how do we relate to those difficult notions, and how do we come to an understanding of not only interbeing, but understanding of ourselves in this planet to overcome. So that's my message for today. I'd also like to present Dr. von Feigenblatt with the book, which he was kind enough to also review for me earlier. Thank you so much.